Que lo que mi gente, welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emi Bertre, and this week we are going to cover the Canadian Grand Prix, the Formula One AWS Grand Prix du Canada. Okay, that was really corny. Yeah, I apologize. I apologize for being so late to post this recording. Yeah, we're gonna get into a lot of stuff. First and foremost, as always, congratulations to the winner, Max Verstappen. Really, this felt like, first of all, this was super exciting race. It's probably been the most exciting race of the season. Last time out, it was a very emotional race, right? As Charles Leclerc got his first win. This time out, it was perhaps up to this point the most exciting race of the season. So, congratulations to Max Verstappen. Congratulations to Max Verstappen only and Red Bull. No, I'm joking. To Max Verstappen only on Red Bull. And yeah, this race really kind of felt like it was the battle of who can make the least amount of mistakes. And what made it really exciting, honestly, was the fact that a lot of teams were fighting towards the front of the grid, right? So let's kick it off by talking about qualifying, right? So oh, qualifying was very interesting. We went into it knowing or feeling like, at least me personally, I went into it feeling like, hey, Mercedes probably has a great opportunity at getting pole. Now, admittedly, I thought that Lewis Hamilton was going to get pole. And I say that given how the free practice runs had gone for him, right? FP1 was kind of a wash, literally. FP2, right? And then FP3 came out and he set a lap time that for a while was about 7/10 faster than everybody else. And ultimately, when the session ended, I think it was about 4/10 faster than everybody else, right? So I went into it thinking, here it is. He is going to get pole position. And then something happened. Now, famously, this season, Lewis has struggled a bit with qualifying. Yeah, I honestly don't know what's going on. You can see that he's super frustrated. It felt like the upgrades that Mercedes had brought in, he finally got the new front wing for his car, had really given him speed. And then suddenly, when we got into qualifying, it just disappeared out of nowhere. Now, many people have made conjecture based on his interviews that perhaps Mercedes is sabotaging Lewis Hamilton, or probably the more provable, more provable thing is that Mercedes is just not prioritizing Lewis Hamilton, right? They're honestly doing a terrible job of the send off, but okay, whatever. He is no longer going to be a driver for Mercedes as of December of this year. And that relationship, that very lucrative and successful, record breaking relationship, is coming to an end. And so the team is saying, hey, we're going to give priority to George, who is still going to be on this team next year, right? And so it was very interesting. This was probably the qualifying that I felt the most sure of for Lewis Hamilton in particular, just because he made it out of Q1. In Q2, he set a time that was actually um, faster, right? So he set an 11.9 fastest time in Q2. That would have been enough for pole in Q3, but suddenly in Q3, it just kind of all fell apart. Nobody really improved on their lap times, by the way. George Russell went in, put in a time of 1.12, 000. And of course, famously, for the first time since 1997, two people got the exact same time. And of course, because Russell set that time first, he got pole. But this is where I will go on record and say that as we got into the race, I never felt that, even though George Russell was on pole, I think that in Canada, famously. Second, starting P2 is just as advantageous, if not more advantageous, than starting in P1. And in P2 was starting Max Verstappen, who, of course, had set the exact same time as George Russell. So believe me when I tell you, right? The grid was George Russell, P1. Then it was Max Verstappen, P2. Then you have the two McLarens, which, by the way, McLaren has been killing it. I think they finally got to a point where they realized, hey, we have found a correlation between we are really fast, and now we know why we are really fast. So behind Max Verstappen, he had the two McLarens, and after the McLarens was Danny Rick, who got murdered, by the way, on live TV by Jack Villeneuve. Um, Jeez. If you have not seen that quote because you don't keep up with it or don't have a cable subscription or you stay off of social media, Villeneuve basically, and I'm summarizing here, asked the question, why is he in Formula One? He referring to Danny Rick because he was saying, Villeneuve was saying that Formula One is a sport that rewards drivers that are fast, eliminates drivers that are slow, and Daniel Ricciardo has not been the same. So he went all the way back as to say he's never really had any competition. He said Danny Rick was up against a Vettel who was really experimenting. So twilight of his career with Red Bull before he went on to Ferrari. Cool. Then he got put up against Max Verstappen, who was still getting his feet under him in F1 after coming in from Toro Rosso, right? And Villeneuve was saying, and even then he wasn't really dominant of Max to the point where he had to leave the team and go to Renault. Then in Renault, obviously, his teammate was Hulkenberg, and then he wasn't in Renault for a long time before he went to McLaren. At McLaren, you start to see the cracks, and he was only at McLaren for about 2 seasons, was out of F1 last season until Nick DeVries foobarred it and they brought him in. Then, of course, Ricardo broke his wrist during the Dutch Grand Prix or the Netherlands Grand Prix, Zandvoort. He messed up his wrist in Zandvoort, right? All of these things, Villeneuve was saying, hey, why is this guy still in F1? Now, Villeneuve is, and by the way, if I'm saying his name wrong, I apologize. Frankly, I struggle to not say Villanueve, okay? Because double L in Spanish is a J sound. It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to put disrespect on a world-class hater like Villeneuve, but regardless, after he made that statement, it was a lot harsher, by the way, than what I just said on national TV. Of course, Danny Rick fans were up in arms on the internet, like, "Who is this guy? This guy's a clown." Blah blah blah. Blah. It it doesn't matter. I don't think he was completely wrong. Is Danny Rick a smile merchant? I don't know. I'd love for Danny Rick to be my friend. Notice me, Danny Rick. Has Danny Rick been living up to his potential? Only he knows that, right? Right now, I would say no. But is it time for him to retire? I don't know. Is he more worthy of a seat in F1 than, say, Liam Lawson? I don't think so. Is he worthy of being promoted to the Red Bull number 2 seat? I also don't think so. So, yeah, I don't think Villeneuve was wrong. Anyways, maybe so full circle moment here. In spite of that happening, I think what ended up happening was Villeneuve said all these things. It was enough to fire up Danny Rick, I guess, or he got the car in the right window and he started in P5. Alonso P6, and finally Lewis Hamilton P7 with Sonoda, Stroll, and Albon topping out the top 10. Right, so it's very interesting qualifying. Not much separation between 10 and P1, and by that I mean all the way down to P10. There was about 8/10 of a time difference, right? But you kind of felt that, right? It's full circle. You kind of felt like, hey, is Mercedes really fast? Yes, at least for this race. Can George Russell win this race? With Max Verstappen behind him, I did not think so. He needed a perfect getaway at the start of the race, and he got a perfect getaway at the start of the race. The person who did not get he had a bit of wheel spin, was Max Verstappen. I think had Max Verstappen not done that, he would have gotten him going into turn one. So great. George Russell led for several laps, as we all know, and eventually mistakes started catching up to him. The first mistake that he made cost him the lead, right? Got a little overzealous. So Verstappen now P1 with Russell P2. But the story for me was the pace of Lando Norris in that McLaren as the track started to dry up and the racing line became more visible and it started drying up in between the rain. And the pace of that McLaren was astronomical. Norris eventually caught up to both of them. Norris eventually passed both of them, and Norris was in the lead and was building a lead. Right, he was up to 8 seconds at one point before safety car set in. But yeah, I don't think that if Lewis Hamilton had been starting on pole, that he would have lost this race. I do think that the craftiness and the pace of that Mercedes definitely would have meant that the car was on for a win. And I say that to say this, right? Like Lewis obviously has to get his qualifyings together. He knows that. I know that. We all know that, right? And I think he will. Famously, during the Monaco Grand Prix, Lewis said, I don't think I'm going to beat George in qualifying this season. He said that for reasons that only he knows. He said, I think George is always going to have 2/10 on me in all of this. Now, again, I'm bringing it full circle. Whether or not he is being sabotaged, I am not here to make conjecture without uh, any kind of proof. I will say that things are starting to look suspicious because, especially for this race, how is it that somebody who was having strong practices, who is a professional, who is a multi-time world driver champion, who has incredible race pace, suddenly forgets to put it together during qualifying? And now I would say what was interesting about all of that was that later on Hamilton kind of expanded on like some of the stuff that was going on. He said this is kind of weird, and the thing that was weird was the temp in his tires was off according to him by 2 or 3 degrees, so he was never able to get them up to the right temperature, was never able to fire them up, right? So he didn't blame the team directly. He said maybe there was something wrong with the tire blankets. Always statesman, always in PR mode. One day when Lewis Hamilton, by the way, comes out with his autobiography and he figures out like, hey, I'm done with F1, that tell-all autobiography is going to be nuts, right? Anyways, and so I'm talking about Hamilton because I feel like if he was able to, and maybe if he was allowed to, uh, do better than George, then perhaps he would have been able to get on pole, potentially win the race. Again, I feel like out of the two drivers, the more mistake prone driver is George Russell. And if you doubt me, just look at George Russell anytime he has to step up to the plate and bring home a victory, right? I am discounting Australia because Australia was not necessarily his fault, but you go back to Singapore last year, you go back to Imola, where he cooked his tires and the team pitted him because they were at risk of losing his position to Checo, right, which cost points. You looked at and I go back, Australia wasn't necessarily, I said Australia wasn't his fault, but perhaps he was a little bit overzealous. Did Fernando brake check him? Mm-hmm. Maybe. Telemetry shows that something happened, but either way, George crashed. Again, last year in Singapore, I think he was putting that at the feet of being pressured by his teammate, crashed literally on one of the final turns, and right, the rest is history. This race, he made a lot of mistakes. He towards the end of the race, tried to make a move on Oscar Piastri in a place where he should not have been making a move. Hit Piastri, went off track. Piastri suffered some floor damage, I believe, and then Hamilton was able to pass both him and Piastri. But because the team had put Hamilton on hards, Hamilton would eventually lose the position to George, and George will finish with the first. George would finish with the first non-sprint podium of Mercedes, right? I'm being very clear about that. George would finish with the first non-race podium for Mercedes, right? Great, awesome. More on that Mercedes drama later. But here's where I'm going with all of that. George started P1, lost 2 places. Lewis Hamilton started P7 and gained 4 spots. Or should I say, no, I can't math, y'all. Sorry. Gained 3 spots. So George lost more than Hamilton gained. And at some point, obviously, he had gained 4 spots because he was up to P3. And frankly, like if he had been on the right tires and if he had been told really, hey, this is what's going on, again, I think he would have been on. And the thing about qualifying, sure, if he had done his due diligence and done what he has been known to do, which is get pole. He's got 104 of them. He owns the record of most poles in F1 history. Yeah, it would have been on. I don't think he would have been as mistake prone. I think we would have seen better racing out of him and Verstappen than Verstappen and Russell. I think we would have seen Verstappen of 2021 who was fighting and challenging someone who was up to his caliber. I said what I said. I'm not going back on that. I think he would have been fighting against Lando Norris, and I think really the only competition he has on the grid right now, besides the car, is Max Verstappen, Alonso, and Toto Wolff, right? I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm so dead serious right now. But we will go back to Mercedes. Right now, I want to go back to the winner of this race, and that's Max Verstappen. So that's Max Verstappen's 60th win. He honestly was able to pull this out. And again, I've always spoken about how Max Verstappen is a generational talent. I will never, ever, ever, ever call into question that Max Verstappen has talent. And if you say that Max Verstappen is not talented or that Max Verstappen is only winning because he's got the fastest, most complete car on the grid, you are doing a disservice to your fave. And by that, I mean, if you are, for example, a fan of Fernando Alonso, right? Fernando Alonso won 2 titles back to back in the early 2000s. That Renault, back when Alpine was actually a respectable team, that Renault was probably the fastest, most complete car on the grid. But being driven by Alonso meant that he was able to squeeze out the most potential out of that car, right? You go to Lewis Hamilton when he was at McLaren, same thing. When Lewis Hamilton won all those championships with Mercedes, again, people like to say Hamilton is a car merchant, and those people are full of shiitake because in that era, Hamilton had Nico Rosberg as teammates. He had Valtteri Bottas as teammates, right? Nico Rosberg was probably his most successful teammate to date, besides Alonso, that he's ever had to face. And Hamilton's dominance was so strong that Nico Rosberg eventually just mentally could not handle it. So he quit, right? Now they bring in Valtteri Bottas, and a lot of people say, okay, well, Valtteri was just brought in as a second driver. Pin on that in a second. Suffice to say, Lewis Hamilton's generational talent brought those titles to Mercedes. They gave him the tool. He did the rest. The same logic can be applied to Max Verstappen in his current role of dominance. I'm only laying this out for y'all so you realize this, right? Because, why am I saying this? Red Bull has 2 drivers. Sergio Checo Perez, el viejo sabroso, and Max Verstappen. They're essentially driving the same car, but Checo has been out-qualified a couple times by Logan Sargent, who hasn't even out-qualified his own teammate. And by the way, Logan Sargent gets crapped on a lot. Honestly, I don't feel like Williams has done right by him. I think they definitely should have given him a fair shot. I think they shouldn't have brought him up when they brought him up. But Williams really hasn't backed him. And now they are openly courting Carlos Sainz. That probably feels terrible as a driver when you know for a fact you are not going to have a drive with your team and they're trying to get somebody else. It's wild. Hopefully Andretti makes it to the grid, and hopefully Logan Sargent gets another shot, or he gets multi-million-dollar funding from somebody. I don't know. I digress. Sergio Perez has been out-qualified at least 6 times by Logan Sargent and has been outqualified by Alex Albon a couple of times, has been outqualified by Yuki Tsunoda in the RB a couple of times. Why is that important? It is important because in spite of both of them being the Red Bull drivers, having the fastest cars on the grid, let me take that back, having the most complete cars on the grid, Checo, I think ultimately, unless he gets his act together, is going to cost him the drivers' championship. Since last year he was getting called out by Lewis Hamilton. If I was in that car, I would be winning. It would be a title fight. This year, he's getting called out by Lando Norris. Lando Norris saying, hey, right now for the constructors, it's really between us and Ferrari because both of us have two solid drivers. A shot and a dig at Checo. And I don't think Checo deserves this, but frankly, come on, dog. Pull it together. You got the contract that you wanted. Pull it together. Anyways, I am highlighting that to say this. Checo Perez was out in Q1. He started from, I think, P16, something crazy like that. And he didn't really make an impression throughout the race. He didn't really make a lot of overtakes. Ultimately, ended up getting into an incident, wrecked his rear wing, came back to the pits, was released, whatever it was, he retired the car. And I think that was all she wrote for it, right? But it was very disappointing for a guy who this week was announced as the second driver for Red Bull on potentially a 2-year deal. Now, it's not clear if it's a 1+1 or if it's a straight up, we're going to give you 2 years. Now, if you are a fan of Checo Perez, I get that you are going to be defending and defensive about the driver that you follow, whether that is unequivocally supporting him, whether that's calling out the unequal treatment of both of the drivers on the Red Bull team. Sure, all of that is important, possibly true. You might call out, hey, what is he doing? Look at what he's done in the past. Without Checo, Max wouldn't have won his first title back in 21. The argument could be made without a lot of stuff. Max Verstappen wouldn't have won, but I digress. My point here is that unless Checo starts stepping up his game, I feel like he is at risk for a couple of things, right? One, they're going to break the contract. They're not going to care about all the money that he's bringing in, and he's going to be gone. And he's going to be replaced by Yuki Tsunoda or maybe a Daniel Ricciardo if they feel like the upside is better, or bring in Isaac Hadjar or maybe Liam Lawson for some crazy reason, right? So he's got to step his game up. In spite of that, Max Verstappen putting the team on his back, doing what he does. And again, I go back. If whether you like Max or not, I leave that up to you. Sure, the evidence is there for whatever it is. What you cannot take away from Max Verstappen is that he is surgical and he does what he needs to do to win the race. Now, maybe when he starts getting some stiffer competition, you will start seeing him make some more mistakes, and now you'll have a title fight. But I was encouraged by this race result. I was encouraged by what I saw. And I am super excited for the Spanish Grand Prix only because this is a known track. The weather should be better. Multiple teams bringing different upgrades. And so really, we will be seeing people doing the most, drivers doing the most. So like, I'm excited about that. I'm hoping that this past race was not a fluke, that we really are starting to get a more competitive season. Because again, like, if Verstappen is on his way to the inevitable 4th World Driver Championship title, great, whatever. He did it. Awesome. Yay. As long as it's not a runaway like it was last year and we get different race winners, which up until now we've had a Carlos Sainz, a Charles Leclerc, and a Lando Norris on top of Max Verstappen. So at least 4 race winners this season that are different, which is different than what it was last year, right? So again, congratulations to Max Verstappen. I don't know what is going to happen come 2026, whether he'll still be on Red Bull. I don't think, unless Toto wants to pair him with Kimi Antonelli and drop Russell. Uh, I don't know, but again, congrats to him. On the other side of the garage, congrats to Checo for getting that contract, for getting that money, for getting that whatever it is. Hey man, congratulations, awesome. He is the only, I'm gonna say he's not the only Latino, but he's representative of the Latin American countries this side of the hemisphere, and obviously he's bringing in millions in merchandise sales across North America, South Central America, the Caribbean. Great, but unless we start seeing some results from Checo, I am baffled. Christian Horner must really love the money and what it brings, or I'm not seeing it. And I am fully cognizant of the fact that if you really wanted to do it, you could also make the same argument about like, hey, well, what has Lewis Hamilton done for me lately? And I would argue that last year in a terrible car, he was able to finish P3 in the drivers' championship. And this year, he has finished higher than Checo has on multiple accounts. So whatever. But congrats. On the other side for Red Bull's junior team, shouts out to La Yukita for getting another contract signed. He did not seem like super excited. It's probably because when Helmut Marko called him up and said, hey, we're going to sign you to RB, Yuki thought he was going to Red Bull. So they're changing Visa Cash App 2-for-1 to a different name. One of my favorite names, by the way, has the initials BFFR. So look that up because I believe, and actually, yeah, we're not a super professional podcast here. Let's see. RB potential name changes. 2 secs, Ted. Yeah, I don't know. It is going to be something else, and one of those is BFFR, which yes, B for real with with that name. Anyways, Yuki Tsunoda got signed to Visa Cash App for another year. Great, that's awesome. We do not know if Daniel Ricciardo will be confirmed as the second driver for that. Yeah, it feels like a relegation. I want them to free my boy Yuki from bondage. Right? I am not sure what else he can do to prove that he at least deserves a shot. I don't know. But in any case, congratulations to him. He did not finish in the points this race, which maybe maybe nullifies all the hype train, right? He finished 14th, but he finished the race. In any case, I will be really, really happy when he is off of that team. Potentially, reunion with Alpine would be cool, but I don't see him going to Alpine because I don't think that team is any better than where he's at right now. I've been an advocate for him to go to Aston Martin, but I don't think he's going to get a chance to go to Aston Martin until either Alonso retires or the Strolls decide this team is now worth enough for me to sell it. So we'll see. Congratulations. Now, full circle to some of the stuff that was happening. I went off on a little tangent with Mercedes, and then just talking again about like what was going on there with Mercedes. I do feel like there's a bit of drama brewing at Mercedes. Yes, sarcasm, because there's a lot of drama, right? Primarily the relationship between Lewis Hamilton and the team has soured. Now, a lot of fans of Lewis Hamilton in particular, myself included, he's phenomenal, great driver, greatest of all time in my book. I am unabashedly a Lewis Hamilton fan. I try to stay objective, but I love Lewis Hamilton. All right. He's the greatest. He represents me. All right. Anyways. And so with Hamilton, the problem has been that the send-off, the going away has not been the greatest. Now, Mercedes understands that they are losing huge revenue streams. They're going to lose sponsors left, right, forwards, back as soon as Lewis Hamilton goes to Ferrari, right? They're going to lose a driver whose skill set and expertise is unmatched by anybody on the grid right now. Okay. They are going to lose leadership on that team. And they have not taken, in the last 3 years, ever since they signed George Russell, they have not taken him seriously. They have, in my mind, started the retirement of Lewis Hamilton going back to 2022. Okay. Plain and simple. At some point, I think Air Wolf thought that, hey, the future is George Russell. Lewis is on his way down or his decline. And yeah, I don't know. And the thing that pisses me off to no extent is that they talk about Lewis's quote unquote declining skills because of his age, but never say a peep about Fernando Alonso, who is literally 3 years older than him and literally has not done anything of note. I said what I said for a long time. All right. So at Mercedes, Toto Wolf, he talks a lot. He was saying, with Lewis, we're going to make this the greatest year ever. We're going to give him the best send off ever, blah, 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 this, that, and the third. Okay. That has not necessarily been the case. The team is going out of their way to celebrate the accolades of George Russell. And they should. Sure. George is staying there. He's going to be there next year. My problem with that is that they are so focused on celebrating George Russell's achievements that they are missing actual and true milestones that Lewis Hamilton is getting. These are things that truly, truly, truly are records that eventually will get broken, but are way more important than what they're celebrating George Russell for. So, for example, he's got 54 fastest laps on him, right? One of the records. He, I think, scored like consecutive points in X amount of races every year. Like it's another record. His race pace is better, and yet he continues to get like the worst strategy out of the two, right? And of course, again, as a team, you're going to prioritize the driver who's in a better position. I understand that. What I don't get is the lack of communication or the lack of giving him an opportunity to compete. All right. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. During this race, this past Sunday, they started everybody on inters. Great. Lewis, along with Fernando Alonso, is able to get up into sixth place with Alonso in front of him at fifth. Alonso, I think, was doing what Alonso does best, which was not letting Lewis pass while slowing him down at the same time. The same car. Eventually, like Lewis was able to pit and come out in front of him with some fresh mediums, right? He sets amazing pace, just lap after lap. He had to fight, by the way, to get the mediums. He wanted to go on slicks. They wanted to, we don't suggest that, Lewis. It's not great. Gasly is out here on hards, and it's not doing great. And Lewis, of course, gets angry. And it's like, yes, because the hards are right. Put me on mediums. They put him on mediums. The pace was blistering. Great. Safety cars come in and they pit Lewis and they pit George because they say, hey, it's a free stop. During the pit, they put George on hard, and I guess, right, they put Lewis, or brought Lewis in, and they put him in on medium. So I guess backtracking a little bit, like during that pit, and nobody come after me. When they both pit, it was a free stop. They send out George on hards. They send Lewis out on mediums, right? When another safety car happens, they bring them in. Lewis is saying, hey, there's 10 laps left. Can we put softs on? Lewis, we don't recommend that. We don't think they're going to last through the race. Do I have any mediums? No, you don't have any new ones. Okay, well, can I just like stay out on these? No, box. Lewis box, they put hards. And then he says, I don't understand why I'm on hards. The driver in front of me, so in reference to George, is on mediums. I wasn't aware, because basically he's saying if I had known that I didn't have any mediums left and that you were not going to put me on hards, I would have just stayed out here. Right now, Mercedes, no, you couldn't have done that because blah, 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 right? But again, it was the lack of communication. It's the same lack of communication that happened in Monaco, and it's the same lack of communication that happened with with Imola, but it finally worked out in Lewis's favor in Imola, which is, he did not pit. The pace was great, and he gained positions because George Russell pit. The point, I guess, that I am trying to make because I am blabbing is this: Lewis Hamilton is not getting the respect that he deserves from a team that he gave a lot to. And again, I prefaced this a long time ago by saying, I know a lot of you will say, well, Mercedes was the one who gave him that car. Okay, cool. Mercedes lost Nico Rosberg because a lot of people were saying, yeah, if Nico Rosberg had stayed there, he would have won multiple championships as well. Nico Rosberg didn't stay there. Nico Rosberg couldn't handle the pressure. Nico Rosberg is actually still obsessed with Lewis Hamilton. I'm pretty sure me and everybody else just wants him to make up and become friends again, right? Nico Rosberg couldn't handle the heat, so he left. All right. So all your arguments about Nico Rosberg, he could not handle being teammates with Lewis Hamilton. Mentally, he could not handle being teammates with Lewis Hamilton. The pressure was too much. All right. So Mercedes retained Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis Hamilton went out and won. And this is something that it does take skill. For years, Mercedes was able to get away with Lewis Inshallah, right? No real strategy, famously. 2019, when they left him out on mediums for 68 laps, and then he won the race. Okay. No real strategy because Lewis Hamilton covered up a lot of the lack of strategy. All right. Cool. So, does Mercedes owe anything to Lewis Hamilton? I believe so. Yes. Do they always need to prioritize him over George? Not necessarily, but whatever's going on now, it ain't it. Because, by the way, if I was George Russell, I would actually be more worried because Toto Wolff is more interested in bringing Max Verstappen, and Toto Wolff is bringing in, or more interested in bringing Andrea Kimi Antonelli into the team because he feels like there's more upside to either one of those guys than there is to George Russell, who, by the way, Toto Wolff had to get on the radio and tell Russell, hey, focus, George. You get a mistake-prone driver. He could drive circles around me, but I'm not a pro. I'm not a multimillionaire. I don't hunt people's... Just kidding. George Russell is not the guy at Mercedes. And as much as George Russell fans want to say that he is the guy at Mercedes, look, I'm legitimately not trying to be a hater. But if George Russell was the guy at Mercedes, would Toto Wolff be trying to bring in better talent and focus on newer talent? If George Russell was that guy, wouldn't Toto Wolff want to sign somebody like a Carlos Sainz or literally bring back a Mick Schumacher for whatever unknown reason? My point is this: Toto feels like there's more upside to either trying to convince Verstappen to come in or a young Andrea Kimi Antonelli. George, to his credit, or maybe not, has said, hey, I'm not here to be anybody's trainer. I'm not a babysitter. We're all pros here. So if Andrea or Kimi Antonelli is my teammate next year, I'm not going to coddle him. Okay, George, cool. And that is what you are losing. That is what you are losing by losing true leadership with Lewis Hamilton. And I believe that Lewis leaving really stung Toto Wolff. And as much as he acts like he doesn't care and that engineers are more important than drivers, okay, Toto, great, awesome. But I think it stings him a little bit. And I would be remiss to mention that they had given Lewis a 1+1. Lewis wanted more from a team that he gave his blood, sweat, and tears to. They said, we're going to give you a 1+1 with your option. And no, we're not going to make you an ambassador. What did they expect? Just again, the disrespect for me for Lewis started in 2022. But I digress. Rant over. For me, the drama at Mercedes is going to be brewing, and I think where it's going to matter most is starting from Spanish Grand Prix, Barcelona on, and to see what happens. Silverstone is going to be very, very interesting. But yeah. So we'll see what happens. The other drama that's going on is the drama Alpine. It was announced last week that Esteban Ocon is not going to be renewed as a driver. I think he's linked to Haas right now. If Zhou Guanyu is not the driver at Haas, okay, great. With Ocon, that pairing, that driver pairing should never have happened. Those two don't like each other. I don't know why they paired them together. I don't know. Gasly, I think, downgraded in terms of going from AlphaTauri to whatever iteration of Renault or Alpine that we have now. Anyway, maybe it was known all along that Esteban Ocon was leaving, but after the incident of Monaco, I think the team, specifically Bruno Famin, was probably pissed off. I mean, I know he was pissed off, but anyways, Ocon is not going to be on Alpine next year. So during the race, of course, under team orders, they said, "Hey, Esteban, we're gonna let Pierre go after Danny Rick. We think he has the pace. He thinks he has the pace. Blah 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 blah." Right? Ocon doesn't like it, but he did what he was supposed to do. Lets Pierre Gasly go through. Right? Gasly was never able to pass Danny Rick, and at the end, Ocon is like, "Hey, are we gonna swap back?" No, no, we're not. And he was pissed. All right, he was pissed. He's like, I do everything for the team. You guys don't, but okay, whatever. Sarcasm. And I don't know how people could. It's drama over at Alpine, right? So the question now is, are Alpine going to sign Pierre Gasly? I think that they will, but who is going to be the second driver? Are they going to give that chance to Jack Doohan, or are they going to bring in Mick Schumacher? I don't think they should. Are they going to bring in somebody else? As for Ocon, is it going to go to Haas now that there's at least one seat, possibly two, because we know that Ollie Berman is probably going to be at Haas most likely next year. I don't think Kevin Magnussen is going to be in Haas next year. And so we'll see. Ocon at Haas will probably be better for him. Now, him as teammates for Ali Berman, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think that under that Ferrari engine, he is going to be doing better than he is at Alpine. But the whole thing is really messy. And frankly, like they should have never put those two together. All right, full stop. Now, as far as Haas, who's going to be there next year again? Sorry to K Mag. I think that he did everything to show that he was going to play the team game and do everything for Haas. I don't think it's going to pay off, but I don't know. Who knows? I could be wrong. I feel like Haas feels like there's more upside to Esteban Ocon. So we shall see. Right. And I guess the last thing that I want to say, right, because I'm not going to talk about everybody, is just thinking about how long it is going to be before Red Bull gets overtaken in the constructor. So is it going to be after the summer break? Is it going to be after the European leg? I've been saying that I'm cautiously optimistic on Ferrari's chances. Yeah, I don't know. Ferrari, maybe this was the race that I'm glad all their strategies failed and not Monaco, because obviously I wanted Charles Leclerc to win his home race. But Ferrari foobarred. All right, both Ferrari drivers out of points. Bad strategy, bad luck. Both, one DNF'd and one was just forced to retire after having engine problems, and then the engine problems were solved, but at that point it was too late. So we'll see. McLaren is making a strong push. Their car is fast with two drivers coming after Red Bull. If they keep finishing second and third, and Verstappen is only able to get first and third, or first and fourth, or fourth and third, or second and fourth, whatever, but Checo Perez continues to get 10th, 11th, 12th, 16th, 8th, it's not going to be enough. So how long? And now you have Mercedes. If these upgrades really are coming through, Mercedes is also going to do some damage. So again, I guess I asked the question to all of y'all: how long before Ferrari, McLaren, potentially Mercedes, one of those teams passes Red Bull? I think last year Max Verstappen won the constructors by himself. This year, I don't think, given that all the cars have caught up, it's going to happen. The last thing, right? As of this recording, supposedly the contract for Behrman is done. Supposedly the contract for Adrian Newey to Ferrari is done, and supposedly that was signed before the Miami Grand Prix. Until I see Sky Sports release a tweet about it, I don't believe it. Everyone's being very, very coy about it. I don't know when they're going to announce, but if that's the case, yeah. Additionally, the regulations for 2026 have been released. Those cars are smaller and potentially a little bit killer of DRS. The new regs means that there's not going to be a DRS. Instead, there's going to be X mode and Z mode. Look those up. But there's been complaints about the team that it's the aerodynamics of that is really wonky. And also, I read somewhere that the cars potentially are actually going to be slower than the current cars. Now, all the teams requested that there should be an extension from uh, adopting these rules as final. So they had until June 30th to uh, codify it, solidify it, affirm that yes, these are okay before they get started working on those cars in January of 2025. Unfortunately, they wanted an extension to review those rules until October 30th, but according to their rules, all the teams unanimously had to decide that, and all the teams unanimously decided wrong. Mercedes was the only one who said nope, because what difference is it going to make if we do it if we extend to October 30th or if we do it now. If we do it on October 30th, that's not a lot of time to get the car set up. So what is going to change? Obviously, I think that Mercedes is probably really happy with this because their engine is probably really powerful. So we'll see. But yeah, all in all, it was truly, 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 truly an exciting race. Canada is one of those tracks that's just historic. A lot of things happen. Um, yeah. Now, as far as my Matatan and my Pariguayo, I am going to say that my Pariguayo for this race. Pariguayo for this race is going to be Ferrari strategy. No, yeah, Ferrari strategy. All right. They really didn't do Charles Leclerc any favors. Really messed up his race. In spite of him having engine problems, they should have told him, hey, that reset you just did actually fix the car. Okay. My Matatan for the race is going to be Max Verstappen. While everyone around him was mistake prone, and Max made slight mistakes himself, he was still able to bring it together and bring that thing home. Got his 60th win. So yeah, Pariguayo, Ferrari, strategy, Matatan, Max Verstappen, and that's it. Next time you see me will be the Spanish Grand Prix. As always, thank you for tuning in. Please comment, like, subscribe. Tell your mommies, your papis, your tios, your tias, abuelos, abuelas for the Monoplaza F1 podcast. I am Emi Beltre. Peace.